Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about how to deal with negative emotions in Kriya Yoga. So in Kriya Yoga and any kind of meditation path, negative emotions can appear in one's awareness and actually prevent one from going into meditation. And so this can happen at the beginning of one's meditation when one starts to trying to focus to get into meditation. It can happen while one is doing Kriya Pranayam. Kriya Pranayam is a form of intentional breathing used in Kriya Yoga that helps to bring one into a low idle state. These hindrances can also arise during the state of Paravasta, which is the after effect poised state of Kriya, after one has done Kriya Yoga Pranayam and associated practices, and one is sitting in that still state of Paravasta, that after effect state of Paravasta. And so these negative emotions can arise at any of those times. And really, those negative emotions are connected with the 5 hindrances. And the 5 hindrances are the hindrances of sensual craving, aversion, sloth and torpor, and doubt. And they manifest in one's meditation as distracting thoughts that arise. And these distracting thoughts are very attractive and tend to pull one away from the object of one's meditation. Although one may be doing Kriya Pranayam or sitting in the state after Kriya Pranayam, those thoughts arise and then the mind's attention moves into that distraction, into that distracting thought. And suddenly one realizes that one is not meditating at all. And so the arising of these hindrances really result from one's previous actions, especially if one has acted in an unwholesome way. So for example, if one has acted out of frustration or irritation, the hindrance of ill will can manifest in one's meditation. And when that happens, all the unresolved thoughts and feelings that are associated with that hindrance of ill will be the preoccupation of one's mind. Suddenly one starts to ruminate on a past scenario and one is no longer meditating. This is an issue because what that does is basically derails one's meditation. One can't go any deeper. And a lot of people get frustrated with this. They say, I can't meditate. My mind goes to these places and I just can't get away from it. They feel like they just can't focus on meditation. And really the most common reason is these 5 hindrances. Now, the good thing is that there's a remedy to these 5 hindrances arising in meditation. And really, that is first and foremost about being able to recognize when one's mind has moved away from the object of meditation. And this recognizing when the mind has moved away is the arising of mindfulness, what is called sati sampajanya. And really what it is remembering to observe how the mind's attention moves from one thing to the other. And this is something that is a really important skill to develop in meditation. One might be very effective at doing Kriya Pranayam, but if one is unable to recognize how the mind's attention is moved, one is unaware that a unwholesome state has arisen in the form of a hindrance. And then one's meditation will be encumbered. So developing the skill of mindfulness is absolutely essential for meditative success. Now, what do you do when you've recognized that this unwholesome state of mind has arisen? You use something called right effort, and right effort really has to do with the prevention of unarisen unwholesome states, the abandoning of arisen unwholesome states, the arising of wholesome states, and the continuance of that arisen wholesome states. And what this means in practical terms is that when you have realized that the mind's attention has moved towards this unwholesome thought, unwholesome state of mind, that you recognize it and you let it go. You don't fight with it. You're not trying to fight with your thoughts to push them down. You're not trying to suppress them. You're not trying to run away from them. You're trying to let them go because the attachment that you have to that hindrance is your attachment. You created it. So the only way to be free of it is to let it go because you're holding on to it. It's like holding on to the string of a helium balloon and it's floating above you, and when you release the string, it floats up into the air and flies away. So that's what you want to do, is to let go of that distracting thought. There's usually a tension in body and mind that is associated with that hindrance. And so you need to let go of that tension in body and mind. And that's what you do when you let go of that hindrance, of that thought. And when you let it go, you relax. And when you relax, what happens is you start to tranquilize that thought. It starts to fade away from your awareness. You're no longer giving it any attention. And as it fades away, you direct your mind back to a wholesome state of mind. And so if you're in Paravasta, in Kriya Paravasta, you might direct it to the feeling of loving kindness, which is a feeling for the well-being for yourself and all others. It is basically a very generic state of being that is a best practice for any meditation technique. And so being in that state of loving kindness, of accepting yourself, accepting others, just allowing things to be without judgment, you're returning to this wholesome state of mind. And when that distraction, when that hindrance starts to clear, you may experience this spontaneous feeling of gladness that arises, which is called pamoja. And that leads you automatically into a deepening meditative state. You start to move through the jhanas, the states of absorption. And these are characterized by feelings of rapture in the body, happiness, well-being, and equanimity. And as one goes deeper, one will start to move into the formless. So those negative thoughts that arise in meditation have a cause, and we are the ones who cause that, right? By making actions in the past that were rooted in the unwholesome and resulted in the arising of the hindrances, which show up in meditation. The good thing is that meditation is a controlled environment where you can allow these hindrances to come up. And when they come up, you can let them go. Really, they're rooted in the karma. They're preconditioned states of mind based on our previous choices. So when we let go of the hindrances, we are chipping away at the karma that binds us to future action. We're allowing it to be released, and we're freeing ourselves from karmic fetters. So we're actually doing something practical and progressive for ourselves in meditation. The other place where negative emotions can arise, obviously, is in everyday life, where we start to feel negative states coming up, unwholesome states start to come up. Normally, most people don't pay too much attention to this, and so the moods will be quite fluid. People will move between being happy and sad, being angry, being joyful, etc., and not really think too much of it. But those thoughts that arise, both wholesome states and unwholesome states, are rooted in something called bhava, embodiment, or habitual tendencies. It's like a storehouse of reactions to everyday life. Some of the reactions are better than others. They're usually very expedient, so we can recognize a situation and immediately we go right to that habitual tendency, right to that reaction. So in some cases, it can be quite efficient, but then it can be efficient for the good and for the bad. The thing is that there are karmic repercussions for any action that one takes. So if one's bhava or habitual tendencies are rooted in the unwholesome around a particular issue and one acts in an unwholesome way, there are karmic consequences for that unwholesome action, both for one's immediate situation and also for preconditioning one's mind in the future. So we are setting the track of our karma forward when we use and react through bhava, through these habitual tendencies. Those are already there. The habitual tendencies are there, and we're creating new habitual tendencies all the time. We're letting go of old habitual tendencies that we don't use anymore, for better or for worse. But what we want is to let go of the negative habitual tendencies, and those really manifest in the negative thoughts that we have, and the negative attitudes, negative viewpoints, negative concepts, and so on that we have in our life. They lead to suffering, so they're worth letting go of. So when a negative thought arises in everyday life, what do? It's the same thing as what we would do in the controlled environment of meditation, is that we recognize that unwholesome state has arisen, that hindrance has arisen. It can be the same hindrances, the same 5 hindrances: sensual craving, ill will, restlessness and remorse, sloth and torpor, and doubt. Those things can manifest in various forms. And when a negative thought arises in that way, we recognize it. And the recognition that the unwholesome state has arisen is mindfulness. It is remembering to observe how the mind's attention has moved from one thing to the other. In this case, an unwholesome state, which has negative karmic consequences. So it's the same thing we do in meditation, is that when we realize that our mind has moved from a wholesome state of mind into an unwholesome state of mind, we recognize it with mindfulness. This effectively stops that thought in its tracks, and it's frozen because our attention is on it. Then what we do, we don't fight it, we don't push it down, we don't try and suppress it, we let it go. It has a tension in body and mind. We release that tension in body and mind, and that effectively starts to tranquilize the thought, and it fades away from our awareness. Then when the hindrance has faded away, we start to experience this spontaneous arising of gladness, pamoja. And it makes us feel good because we're no longer encumbered by that hindrance. It's like throwing off this shackle on us, this heavy weight, and suddenly we feel lighter. And as we start to let go and return to a wholesome state, it starts to draw spontaneously into a meditative state, even in our everyday awareness. Suddenly there's a clarity in mind, there's a peacefulness, there's a loving kindness, there's good feelings, feelings of goodwill for others and for oneself, and we feel like we are free from that hindrance, from that encumbrance of that negative thought. And all we had to do was to recognize that it had occurred and to let it go. So this right effort, the prevention of unwholesome states and the letting go of existing unwholesome states and the arising of wholesome states and the continuance of those wholesome states is one of the most important practices that one can apply in meditation. And one can use this in every single situation, regardless of one's spiritual tradition. And so if you apply this in your everyday life and in your meditation, you will find that you will start to grow spiritually in leaps and bounds. And this will rapidly accelerate your spiritual development and lead to awakening. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.